you have Android? Or was it
No, it's an iPhone. Ooh, I got 4 out of 5 reviews. Totally wrong thing for this.
There's somebody in here.
There's nobody else logged in there that. I mean, Judy's logged in, but
Do you know the distance that?
she doesn't have her audio connected.
Greg's in. Yeah, all right. We need to meet. Okay. My co-term will be yours.
Greg.
You had somebody. Okay.
All right, are we good to go? All right, and I don't need to like wait for a high sign from Keith or anything, right? Okay. Cool.
Actually, Rebecca, this has nothing to do with Zoom. There's like an AV issue going on right back. Something with the HDMI is flickering on the board, so that signal will be. So that's in Zoom. Okay. So just before we start this, there can only be one instance of audio within the same room. So anybody who joins audio within the same local classroom, you can get something like that. Wow. Yeah, you'll know it. You'll know it. So it's not even like, if you're local, it's not like join and mute. It's just, there's no gain to join, only reverse effects. So you can join, skip over the audio, you can be part of the video, you can be part of the chat with the audio because.
Don't need to go get the other guys.
Okay. So where are the microphones on these?
Was that what you said?
Yeah, so those are the microphones, the regular ones that capture the audio for Matterhorn. And all of that is being captured in there and fed into Zoom for people who are participating. So the problem is if you open up your audio and then you're capturing it in the two places, then we get the feedback. So have we got everybody you want to have here?
James is coming, but you can start. I mean, we're recording. Right?
We are recording. So just so everyone knows, we are doing 3 different modes of recording. One of them's not recording, but capturing what's happening here. So we are going to have a regular opencast production of this. There's a live stream and a recording. We are also capturing this in BriteClass. And if anybody wants to log in to BriteClass, I don't know if you shared around those logins.
You guys do.
You can use that to view the recording after the fact, or you could log in without audio again and look at it live in BriteClass. We have these sort of test student accounts. And then we also are using what we're calling Zoom in the Room, which is totally made up thing that we created ourselves that is actually sort of is entirely the design of Christian Franco. We went over to visit, well, I'll tell you a little more about it later, but about the genesis of it. But the experience of it, you're seeing it here, is that participants are able to be in the classroom live and be viewed on these screens in the room, so that unlike just being in a text chat where everybody in the room is unaware of them, we're aware of them. And if they unmute their audio and they're not physically in the room, it won't cause a problem, and they can actually talk to us and we can talk back to them. So Jody asked me to just just give a little talk that orients you to the types of things that we've been thinking about and piloting. There are essentially 3 pilots going on this summer, and all of them are related to basically the turning point that we're at in thinking about lecture capture. And before I even get into it, I just want to plant the seed for all of you that something we desperately need is a rebranding of lecture capture as a term. What we actually do in our classes goes far beyond the concept of just capturing a lecture and producing it for students. And you'll see that as a theme in the stuff that we're looking at here. And one of the issues that we're facing is that the concept, or the sort of the popular idea of what lecture capture is really out of vogue in the community. People think of it as a very passive experience for students. And so one of the things we need to figure out how to do is to make our version of lecture capture, whatever we call it, be a really good engaged learning experience. And number two, make sure that we're doing a very good job of communicating what it is that we're doing, because it is in fact already a really good engaged learning experience. But at the moment, we still have a ways that we can go in terms of what we actually present to students while they're watching a lecture. So I'm going to go through 3 different things: BriteClass, Zoom Live, and Zoom in the Room, and also give you a little context about the pilot, why we're doing it now, and what's coming up in the future. Let's see if I can get this to actually present. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so first I'm going to start with BriteClass and just give you a little context for what it is that interested us about BriteClass, why BriteClass in particular drew our attention. So it came to our attention because Henry's friends with a professor of astronomy, Dimitar Sasolov, who was independently using BriteClass for his classes, and he was really enjoying it. So he said, Henry, let me bring these guys in to demo for you. And when they did demo for us, they had several things that they showed us that were highly appealing and were unlike anything that we had seen in any other lecture capture video system. And that kind of woke us up to that we had some things that we probably hadn't correctly prioritized. So basically, your team has been delivering according to a list of priorities that we haggle and work out and rehash again and again and again. And there were some aspects of it when we saw this competitor where we thought, here are some things that they are doing that we wish that we had put more energy on, or that we wish that we could and will put more energy on in the future. And so those are up here. First of all, there were some pedagogically valuable features. And so these are the things that actually turn watching the video into an engaged learning experience. The main one is that it has integrated time-tagged discussions. These are threaded discussions, so that as you're watching the video, at any particular moment, if you have a question or a comment, you can just pause your video, type in your comment, and it gets attached to the video at that point. When other students or teaching staff come through, they see your comment there, they can reply to it, they can add their own comments. You can jump around the video to see other people's comments. And so the part of this that seemed very appealing is if you imagine a class that takes place on Monday, a student who has set aside Thursday evenings to do their homework, they go and they watch this video. They're by themselves at home. They don't know anyone else in this class. And their experience currently is a totally solo experience. They see some students in the class, but they never get to interact with them. This immediately puts interaction in their hands without any need for the instructor to do anything at all to make that start to happen. BriteClass claims that this is something, and Dimitar confirms that this is something that students just do without any particular prompting from the faculty. We've only had the pilot up and running for a couple of weeks. I have yet to see, well, actually, a discussion was only turned on yesterday, but I haven't seen any students start doing this yet in our BriteClass pilot. What I'm fairly confident would happen is that if the faculty drive it, basically focus on it, show it to the students, and perhaps take the extra step of prompting some kinds of engagement with the content. So for instance, you might have the TA as the class goes on. When something interesting happens, the TA might add some questions in BriteClass or some prompts to say, just stop for a minute and write either a private note or a shared comment about your reaction to this thing that was just discussed. And just those moments of having a student stop and try to integrate what they just watched are sort of, I mean, that's sort of the hallmark of what active learning is. That seems to be what helps people actually keep that stuff in their head and make sure that they've put it together with everything else that they already knew. Another feature that they have, which is a really nice feature, they're using the IBM Watson APIs to generate automatic synchronized transcriptions of all of the content, and that's also available for captioning. And so that's very nice for students when they're looking for something in particular, and also is an extremely useful service for people who are English language learners or otherwise might just benefit from being able to read along while they watch. So those were the big sort of pedagogical features that got us.
I just want to know the annotation,
Yes.
the discussions, are they added after the fact or to the live thing?
They're available in both modes, the live and after the fact. And if you make a comment during the live class, it appears for everyone who's watching it later. And I can show you what it looks like. I have it up in a tab here. So this, oh, and I forgot to mention the thing that Chris told me to mention right at the outset here, which is that in our BriteClass pilot, all of the classes, which is 8 classes plus this test course on which we're actually recording this, are available to all of the students. So theoretically, any student who's in those 8 classes could tune in to this particular meeting, just FYI. I can't imagine that we're going to say or do anything that would be troubling to students, but just so you know. Let's see, I wonder if I refresh this, will it fill the whole screen properly? So here, okay, it's brought me back, and it doesn't look like it's going to fill the whole screen, probably because it's displayed. So this is, when a student gets to the BriteClass video page, this is what it looks like. And I'm going to just select our test course out of the list of courses and jump into a recorded session here. Normally, this looks a little better on the screen. It gives you more real estate, but you can drag this back and forth. These are the tabs down here at the bottom right that let you do discussion, taking notes for yourself, and bookmarking particular points in the video. And all of those are just essentially annotations. If I pick a particular time that I'd like to make a comment, if I just click the discussion button, I can write a comment right here. And if I, here, it's, I think, this little button hides and shows. If I go to the point where I wanted my comment to be, and then I type, you know, whatever I want. This is interesting. I'm sure this is very hard to see. And then whatever else. And click post. It posts my comment there. And then another student who comes across it can click reply and type a reply, or they can add comments wherever they want. And it creates this little heat map underneath the video that shows you how many comments there are at different points in the video. What appealed to us about this was nothing at all related to the UI. I'll revisit that in a couple of minutes. But the basic functionality of it, that it's possible to, at a particular moment, add in the discussion post and then have threaded replies to it, and that it's something that happens together with your experience of watching the video. Then the other part of their demonstration to us that was appealing was that they had some very interesting ways that they were doing the technical side of lecture capture that seemed quite promising. So one of them is that they are using these really cheap encoder boxes. They're actually pretty hardware agnostic, but they're using these ones from this company, I think it's German, called AU Video, and they're little $400 boxes. And I know, Gabe took a look at them, Jody's looked at them. And the reason that they're able to do this is that they don't, in hardware, record the 2 streams at the same time. So they have one box that's recording the presenter and one box that's recording the presentation. And I don't quite know what they're doing to synchronize it. I know that they find it much easier to do whatever they're doing if it's HDSDI than if it's HDMI, because there's some kind of time information in the format. I think Christian Wisecarver will know a lot more about this. He's been working with them on the more technical side of it and knows a lot more than I do. But basically what that means is that the installation in a room is much, much easier because you don't need the cabling that connects the front of the room to the back of the room and all of the sort of complexities of getting all of the two, well, getting both of the two feeds into one box. It also means that they have a much wider range of hardware that they're able to take advantage of because it doesn't need to do the dual recording. And so we wanted to say, so they basically said, look, we can do as many rooms as you want, as soon as you want. Like we could do every room on your campus for fall. And so we kind of wanted to see, well, how real is that? How hard is it? Because we knew that a lot of the problems we have in rooms isn't because of the dual stream, it's because of other AV issues in the room, scalers, you know, who knows what else, all kinds of crazy stuff in the rooms. So we wanted to see, oops, sorry, that was obviously the wrong thing to do. So we wanted to see if that was real. Additionally, they use boxes or are able to use boxes like a Teradek Cube that are Wi-Fi enabled small encoder devices that can live stream directly. And so that opened up the possibility of something that was a much more lightweight, portable live mode, where you might be able to essentially give this box to a videographer that they would carry in their camera case with them to the classroom. And all they have to do to make a classroom a live classroom is plug their camera into this box, and suddenly you would have a live room. That seemed very appealing to us. We've struggled a lot with how to get live into more rooms. And so we wanted to test that out. In terms of what they do within their software, they're using adaptive streaming. So we wanted to see, was that going to work better for students who were suffering with bandwidth issues? And they also, similarly related to the dual streaming, they only are streaming one stream at a time. Instead of seeing both windows next to each other in their interface, you could switch back and forth between the presenter and the slides. That makes it a lot easier for them to support mobile. And so they support mobile. They do HLS and Dash as their ways of doing the streaming. So those were the things that made it interesting to us. There's then a whole bunch of questions of why are we looking at anything at all? And if we're looking at these guys who are a sort of a small upstart company, why are we not looking at some of the other big players in the game who do this probably in a much more professional way than the BriteClass guys do? And so there were a bunch of different reasons that I have, and this list here basically represents my point of view. I'm not speaking for anyone else or for Henry, at least on this slide. So first of all, what we have right now works really well. Matterhorn Opencast in our Matterhorn rooms is working very smoothly. It's quite reliable. The producers have a very easy time producing their classes. The quality of it is great. The player looks great. We have the kind of control over it where if we change our priorities, we have the team here that can help that stuff, have us work on the things that we think are most important to work on. So those are huge benefits of our current system for us that are hard for any competitor to overcome. There are some particular key needs that Matterhorn isn't meeting for us at this point. And those are basically around the interactivity, the pedagogical features, and how we are going to support the idea of an interactive live and asynchronous experience. Portability, the ability to go to any room as opposed to being stuck with just, okay, we've got 10 rooms and it takes us a long time to expand. And we always have this problem with these classes where we have no control over what room they're in. So we have to be able to just go to any random room with only 3 days notice. And mobile, which we just hear about all the time. It's, as far as Tom says, the sort of biggest student request is why aren't we supporting mobile? So the other big products that are out there, the things that you would consider to be the direct, most obvious competitors, don't actually offer us significant benefits in these areas. I mean, some of them have some mobile support, but it's no easier to get into a room. They're more expensive, and they don't offer the same they're no better on the portability features or the interaction features. So given the enormous benefits to us of having our own system, which already works well and it's already our own team doing it, there was not a lot of drive for us to go out there and start looking at MediaSite, which is already tanking across the rest of the university. Or maybe I'm not supposed to say that on this video, but whatever. So BriteClass actually offered something interesting to us in these particular areas where the other competitors didn't really have anything to offer. They, in fact, consider their competition in some sense to be web conference software. And you can see that in the design decisions that they're making that are much more focused on the interactive features. So they're thinking about adding breakout rooms and things like that that we worry about with our web conference software, and not so much on the lecture capture side of things. And then we also are in this situation where basically Hunt committed 3 years, we're going to go all in on Matterhorn, and we've gone all in on Matterhorn, and we're at the end of the 3 years, and the costs are high, and he's saying, okay, so what's happening here? Is this the right thing for us to do? And so is it time for us to do that kind of introspection and reevaluation of our priorities, checking out what else is going on, and then making sure that if the thing that we want to do is continue to move ahead with OpenCast, we're able to make a really strong case to him of this is the #1 best path for us at this time. We think you should do this and commit to it and really do it the way it needs to be done. Or we have an alternative proposal for you of a different way we can go that theoretically would either substantially increase the quality or features of what we're doing or substantially lower our costs. So BriteClass is the only thing that looked like it might be able to do, sort of be the other candidate. And it has been extremely helpful in orienting us to where we haven't had our priorities straight, or where we had our priorities straight, but now we've gotten to the time where we need to shift them, because it is the case. Our highest priority has been on reliable, high quality, live and on-demand video that we can produce and manage at scale. Those are the things that you guys have been working on and succeeding at over the past bunch of years, and we have that now, and that is still the most important thing to us. But there were some other things that were a little surprising and that were not consistent with basically the specifications that you were receiving in terms of what was needed for some of the products. For instance, portable live. That's probably the biggest point of divergence. One of the things that happened in this last year when we switched to Matterhorn and stopped producing in legacy and stopped using timestamper and screen capture is that in all of the non-Matterhorn rooms, we no longer have 2 side-by-side streams. We just shoot podcast style. And that happened by necessity because we no longer had the ability to do that. It was something that I think we were all worried about losing. It turns out that we have received, so far as we know, 0 complaints about this from anyone so far. So the system is working as it is, shooting podcast style in these rooms. It is completely clear that, at least within the production team, which is where I mostly hear feedback from, that 2 side-by-side synchronized presenter and presentation streams is the gold standard. That's what we want. That's definitely what we prefer when we can possibly do it. But it turns out that instead of it being unacceptable for us to produce an alternative that's just shooting podcast style, it was actually okay for us to move to podcast style. Additionally, the ability to have some kind of a live mode in a classroom, even if it wasn't the synchronized 2 streams or fully up to the level, like with the same kind of multiple capture agent redundancy, it was still worth it to us to have the live stream there in those classrooms. It's something that's still desirable. So when we go back to look at, okay, what that project Gabe was working on where he's building this, suitcase of equipment, that was geared towards specs that required, we need to have presenter and presentation, we need to have redundancy for live. And we ended up with a portable setup that basically takes an hour to set up in a situation where we only have 7 minutes. to actually do the setup. So it also was expensive. So it didn't turn out to be a usable system for us. And so we found out, basically looking at how appealing the offering from BriteClass was, that actually, as long as we can get the rapid, easy setup, then even if we can have only one camera, and even if it isn't totally redundant, that's still something we really want. Additionally, we found out that adding these interactive features, which is something that many of us have been talking about, it's been on our priority list, since I have been here, but just not at the top of it. That's now something that is a real big selling point for us for the system. And so it's something that's just getting pushed up towards the top. And those are things that, while we've been in discussion about them, actually having a side-by-side comparison of our current system with a competitor helped us actually focus on, well, if this is something where our current system might lose because it doesn't have this, then we haven't actually done a good enough job of saying, well, this is something you guys need to compete on. So that was interesting. The BriteClass pilot so far. In the spring, we put it into a couple of rooms just to make sure the whole system got up and worked, and it did. Those were rooms 304, 306, and 307. And then we decided we would go forward with a broader pilot in the summer in which we would actually have students use the system. And the idea there was to both get student testing of the system to see how they liked the features, and to expand to 2 rooms that would be more like FAS classrooms, rooms where we couldn't do a significant install. We wouldn't have a lot of lead time to get it set up. And so we expanded to Seaver 113 and Northwest B108. We had made a decision that basically in late July, the management team, James, Jody, me, and Henry and I would decide, are we going to continue with basically phase 3 of the pilot in the fall, where phase 3 would be essentially a massive rollout, similar to what we did with Matterhorn, just try to say, can we actually handle the load of full production with this system? So far, I would say, we're not going to make any decisions until July 18th, but things are not looking great for the BriteClass pilot for a couple of reasons. First of all, there were large and predictable stumbles on the reliability and quality, and a lot of those were based on the same kinds of things that we experience with OpenCast, like scaling, faulty HDMI switcher, just different things like that. They are harder to communicate about and take longer to fix, even though the BriteClass team is very communicative with us. The basic setup of the system does in fact seem to work pretty reasonably. We've also had a bunch of student complaints about difficulty watching the video, buffering and stopping, some of which are related to the HDMI splitter problem in Northwest. So we'll see, now that that's fixed, how those continue on. The biggest problem we've had with it is that the UI is really weak in a variety of ways. It's confusing. It's hard for students to figure out how to get into their own course videos, and hard for them to understand what the different buttons mean in the first place. And so it hasn't felt like a very easy thing to push faculty to push their students to use, although the faculty have been, for the most part, pretty game. So as of right now, we don't have a lot of information about the pedagogical features, basically because as students are having trouble, we're telling them, fall back to Matterhorn. And if faculty are having trouble, we aren't pushing them, make your students do this. We want them to have the best course experience that they can have. So we're, still considering it. I guess actually something else that needs to be on this list is that they're live, portable live. We're testing out the Wi-Fi setup with the Teradek next week. It's currently set up behind the firewall with over Ethernet and this and that. But their live has had a latency issue that is very tricky to deal with. Basically, the way they're doing the slides is through screen sharing, and I think they've changed this now, but slides were through screen sharing, and live streaming was a regular live stream. I don't know what it is, RTSP or some kind of streaming. There was a difference between the two of them. So that was very bothersome when the audio of, for instance, a movie that somebody was playing in class would be out of sync with the movie. So anyway, there have been a variety of problems. We have been working with them on it. They've been extremely responsive. But I would say it hasn't been that they came in and, automatically delivered every single thing that they said they were going to deliver. We've had videos that didn't ingest, and they have they added trimming last week. It's a much more limited trim capacity than what's in OpenCast, but it does work. They have a kind of a cool way that theirs works, where the video gets published immediately after it is ingested, and then the trim is non-destructive cut points into the video, so the trim can be done after the fact without the video coming down or having to be reprocessed, which is very nice. I can imagine classes where the faculty member would say, I don't want it to go up until after it's been edited, but I think for many classes, the faculty member would prefer, let's just make it available as soon as it's ready, and then we'll do the trimming as soon as we can get to it. So that's kind of a cool thing that they do. They haven't delivered upload yet, which is one of the features that we basically, it's a showstopper for us. We can't do anything without upload, so we're still waiting on that. Yes?
You mentioned that for some classes you may want to publish immediately, for others not. Do they have the flexibility of having two different workflows depending on the course?
It appears that they do, but it's not something that, there's many things that they have the capability to do that are not exposed in their administrative UI, and so that are done right now by us calling them or emailing them. And so some of those things, I have no idea how easy or hard it is for them to do it. They appear to be very easily able to turn on and off different features of the user interface. So they can give you one with no interactive stuff. They can give you any specific interactions that you want. But then with things like upload, they can do that behind the scenes, but we can't do it. I don't know. Chris, do you know more about that? About whether there's a setting for whether the video automatically publishes before you do the curtains on it? Curtains is their name for the trim feature, just for reference. Yeah.
We opted against that because the students still can see the whole video, so even when you soft trim based on the old IA, you could still get to the parts that were curtained out.
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting question how you would do the soft trim while also preventing students from getting there. I mean, even if it were somehow just showed a black screen or something like that, like it would be enough. But we do have to sometimes be able to really hide stuff. So there's a ton more details about this, which for the most part, Christian, Chris Rod and I are wrangling with the BriteClass folks, but we're happy to go into it in endless detail. The place where I think it's important is there are a lot of good ideas here in what they're doing, even when they aren't always executed well. And so at the very least, we should copy anything that we think would be valuable to our own system. So before I move on to Zoom Live, does anybody have any more questions or comments or thoughts about BriteClass?
Could some of the other producers who've actually done BriteClass production give their experience?
Any of you guys on there have a BriteClass class that you're producing? John or Greg or Christian? I think Christian does. I think Chris also may have some other useful things in terms of the way that it deals with the schedule and the management of the schedule, and both positive and negative as we think about how we might deal with that in Matterhorn. Yeah, maybe it'll be worth you sitting down and showing what they have and what you like and dislike about it to somebody on the dev team if we decide that we're going to wind down the pilot before we've lost our access to it. All right, so let's move on to Zoom Live, and you're going to have to just forgive my horrific diagram here, and it may in fact also be incorrect in various ways, so Christian Franco can correct me. But this represents my understanding of Zoom Live. Now, what's going on here is as we started thinking about the portable live setup, we realized that we were, to some extent, already doing this in certain classrooms, basically, we were doing it by using web conference software as our live streaming. And so the question was, how simple can we make this setup? Can we make it such that a videographer can carry everything they need, not be a computer whiz, set the whole thing up and have it running within the 7 minutes between class? And so through a bunch of work, mostly by Christian Franco, and also by Rod, we have this setup that we're currently using. So the videographer goes with a camera. They have a little box, which is either, we have a couple of, one kind made by Epiphan, another one made by Aja, which we don't have, but theoretically will appear at some point, that takes in the feed from the camera and puts out a feed that can go directly into Zoom. And it also has a loop out, which lets us take then the video to the nano flash so that we can capture it for Matterhorn. And let me just state again, this is only a live solution. This is not a capture solution. And then we have a laptop set up with a Zoom room already ready to go, and a sort of a simple way for a videographer to figure out what they're supposed to log into. So the idea is they more or less only have to just sort of double click something after they've plugged in. They don't have to know a whole bunch about it. The camera's shooting podcast style in that room. So the students who are participating live, they click their link to join Zoom. They have one window which shows them everything that's happening in the room, and then they can see video of all of the other students that are there. They also have a text chat. So this functions as essentially an enhanced version of live chat that we already would be using in a live classroom, plus the live video. And it's very lightweight. And so far, in the testing of it that Christian have done, it takes only about 5 minutes to set up. It is carryable in a pretty simple way, but we only have a couple of people who have tried out doing this, and they are technically sophisticated. So our next step is to have more producers, also a technically sophisticated bunch, test out doing this, and then if that's still going well, to try to see, can we train a few of our videographers to do the same? And most likely this is something that we will do for some classrooms in the fall, classrooms where we otherwise would not have a live stream at all as a Zoom Live beta. And maybe we'll be doing a handful of them just to create live rooms where we don't have them. This is quite promising. It's a cheap solution. It's the same interface that students are used to from web conference courses. It's very easy to use. From the student's point of view, they can see and hear the video from the room. There is no latency. So it's when they have a question, they're not 30 seconds behind. They can participate in the live chat. They can ask questions via the TA the same way they could if they were using Canvas chat or the old chat rooms in a live class. And if there are group activities in the class, like take a few minutes to talk to the person sitting next to you about such and such a question, that can easily be done using the breakout rooms features and other interactive features within Zoom. So this is a pretty nice solution for us for live. And we'll see where we can get to with it. Zoom in the room actually came first for us out of the two things, but is distinct. So Zoom in the room is what we're experiencing here, and you can see just how easy it is to have a conversation with the people who are participating remotely on Zoom. They can talk to us. There's no latency. Very simple, easy to manage. Chris can wave her hand, get my attention. From my point of view as a teacher, with the monitor at the back of the room showing them, it's just as easy for me to see them as it is for me to see anybody who's sitting in front of me. And if they can't get my attention by waving, they can just say something, and it will get my attention because their audio is in the room. So from the room point of view, it's quite easy for the faculty member, and not really necessary for the faculty member to do anything. From the student's point of view, they are getting both the presentation and the presenter in two separate windows on their screen. So they have both of those as separate things that they can focus on. And they still have the back channel chat that they can have with a TA. So they have that extra advantage. Is the reason why people who are in the room might also want to join, so that they could also get into that back channel chat that's happening. And they can also do the group activities. So it's also a pretty cool setup. Much easier for the distance students to feel like they're not second-class citizens in their online option courses. A lot harder for the faculty member to forget that they're there. Let's see, so right now this is natively more or less set up. It takes, there are only a few people who know how to get it going, but it takes only a couple of minutes to get it set up and running, maybe half an hour for 304 and 306. We also have a sort of a hacked together version of this for Maxwell Dworkin, G115 and 125. Where we don't have a nice monitor at the back of the room, and there are some other hacked together pieces of it. It's less easy to use and a less good experience. Over time, this might be something that we would want to spread to more classrooms that we do have control of. And that's it. That's all I've got. So do you guys have questions or thoughts or comments about the Zoom stuff?
This would be only used as right now in these rooms.
Yes.
4 to 6, so there.
So in another room, we would be able to do Zoom live, but not Zoom in the room. And the difference being that there's basically stuff I completely don't understand of how the audio is managed so that we are not hearing all of the echoes as it happens, but their audio can come into the room in a clean way. So we use an AV bridge is the key piece of equipment, I think, that's letting them do this. Phoebe?
Are the sessions recorded?
They can be recorded. That's something that's within the control of basically the hosts of the room. So we could record these sessions from within the control room. Or in the Zoom live setting, the videographer could be in charge of making sure that those sessions are recorded. There are some problems with those as recordings. So first of all, the recording is saved locally on the computer of whoever was running that session. And it takes a little while to convert, actually not that small, a while. And then after that, it's just this file that's sitting there and you don't know what to do with it, and it's not small. There's no built-in editing capability in Zoom to let you trim it. And generally it does need trimming because usually the host is the first one there getting set up. And so there'd be like a whole long bunch of nothing at the beginning of it. And then there's no clear sense of where it's supposed to go from there. So possibly with Zoom Live, we might be able to come up with a workflow where something would happen with that laptop. It would go through essentially our regular old, something like our old card return and ingest process. Somebody would go and get all those Zoom files. Then they would have to put them in Premiere, edit them, upload them into Matterhorn, a whole process. And the resulting recording, if you're going to watch it later, isn't really what you want because, it might be if the class was a highly discussion-based class, but if you're watching it after the fact with no ability to participate, what you're mostly going to want to see is the presentation and the presenter. And then you might want some of your own way to interact, but you don't really want to watch all those other people just sitting there participating in class themselves. Not only that, they don't want to be in that recording of that class in that way. So it's not an ideal setup for producing a good recorded version. It does work.
Have you done it with a lot of students logging in at the same time?
Not so much with the Zoom Live, although we have several classes that we have managed that have run using, a couple of classes using Zoom as a way for students to participate in real time. But Zoom is our primary web conference platform at this point. And so that means that every day we're running classes that are 35 students running on Zoom. It's been a very reliable system overall. It works very well for students who are participating with low bandwidth. Our help desk is very knowledgeable about it, and it's very easy for them to troubleshoot with students who are having difficulties. It's usually their own unfamiliarity with the platform, although it turns out to be extremely easy to use. So one thing that's nice about this is that we're basically piggybacking on what's already one of the DCE primary systems.
So then you see that using Zoom for live in some classes that will not, they're basically, so how the combination of using Zoom and Matterhorn or BriteClass?
So you have to use one or the other. There would be a couple of problems if you tried to use both at once. The first problem would basically be the audio. If you had the live stream open in one window and Zoom in another, if you unmuted yourself, then you would cause a weird audio problem where you'd be feeding 30 seconds ago of what was happening in the classroom back into the classroom. Or into the conference. Then the second problem is the latency, that the live stream is going to be about 30 seconds to a minute behind what you're experiencing through Zoom. So for those students who are in classes where they're using live as the way of participating, they would direct students to use Zoom as the way to participate live and Matterhorn to watch the recordings after the fact. But students would have the choice. So if a student truly wanted a completely passive experience, they could choose to stay out of the interactive Zoom version of it. And one of the things that is a sort of frustrating aspect of all of this is that given the opportunity to be passive, students will be passive. So it is hard to like get them to turn their camera on. It's hard to get them to start talking. It's hard to get them to choose the thing where they're going to be participating, even though if you asked them, they would tell you that they know that that's better for their education to do it. So I don't know. It would be interesting to see as we have more classes that have both things going on, which things students use. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So the student feedback about Zoom and BriteClass is going to have more during summer?
So our hope is to be able to solicit feedback from the students using a survey through their course websites, probably basically in the final week before we make a decision about it. We have, so the Zoom and Zoom Live pilots are not sort of facing the same kind of decision point in July. So we do have a couple of classes that are using it this summer. We have classes using Zoom in the room in the fall, and we'll have Zoom Live classes. We're just at the beginning of testing it this summer, but we'll have classes using it in the fall, and we'll probably focus more on actually gathering feedback from students and faculty in the fall for those ones, rather than trying to do that at the same time this summer. And I still don't have a good answer for basically how we're even going to gauge how many students are actually doing the BriteClass pilot at all. It's a little bit like the way it used to be with the Matterhorn beta, that it's this button on their video listing page, and who knows who goes there.
About like the comments, and maybe we go to try.
Yeah. So I have been meeting with the faculty members of each class who's in the pilot and encouraging them, if they're willing, to show it to the students and encourage them to use the discussion. And we're only on day 2 of it being up there. I haven't checked every class to see, but so far I have not found any discussion posts. So we'll see.
I don't think the classes that are on the BriteClass pilot, they're like different subjects.
Yes.
Right?
They're a pretty good variety. It's more incidental than on purpose, because it's mostly based on the rooms. So we have 3 rooms in Story Street, and then 3 classes that are in Seaver and Northwest B108. But they do, we have management classes, environment classes, religion classes, it's, politics. There's various things.
If it was the computer science, they probably wouldn't use just as much.
That's interesting. I don't know, and
If you're in humanities, I guess people need to talk.
yeah, well, I don't know. The computer science classes, there's a lot of questions, right? The material is hard in our computer science classes, so.
I have a question on
yeah.
the Zoom. There's being logged in as a student. I actually have a record button that if I click on it, it says please record permission from the meeting host. But is that something that you would look to allow the student to do, to record that Zoom session?
We haven't actually thought about how we would handle that for the classes in which the instructor is kind of hands-off with it. For our regular web conference classes, that's a preference of the instructor and something the instructor can change in their settings. I think there's some complexity to, like, I'm not sure that it's a good idea for us to let students do that themselves, because...
I could see a student wanting to do it like at a review session before a final, like so they could capture all that and review it. But
Yeah.
I don't know, the legality and how we would open that up and dictate all that.
I mean, the preferable system would be for us to have the recordings hosted in a protected way, on an automated way, so the students could rely on it being there, but would not be able to download it, because I do think that there could be, it could result in FERPA violations, copyright violations, and various problems if a student decided to post that video, on their Facebook page or whatever. So,
Looks like Christian has a question.
oh, Christian, go ahead.
Yeah, because of course I was immediately thinking of trying to record.
Yeah.
So I'm sure students would do the same thing.
Yeah. For my own web conference class this spring, I had mine set up to automatically record, so I didn't have to remember to press the record button. But it was still hard to remember to post the finished recording on my course site.
And it records what's in the window, and so when I switch back and forth between the slide and the presenter, that's actually what it's recording, right?
Yeah, so that's a good point. It records the view of that person who is recording, and it does not record the chat, which is interesting. Doesn't record the text chat. So that's something that I think Tom has requested from Zoom as a feature to be able to record the text chat. But also that thing of it recording someone's particular view is not necessarily the ideal setup for the recordings either. It's really not, it's not up to the level as a technology for us to use as a way to actually record the courses, which is why at the moment we're only considering it as a way to do live participation. And we would always go to Nano.
So I'm sure you noticed there is an ability to save the chat. It just gives you a timed text file.
Yeah.
So is Zoom in the room to kind of replace the current web conferencing tool? The current web conferencing is Zoom related.
The current web conferencing is Zoom, and for Zoom, everyone is online. There's nobody in the room at all. Yeah. And so Zoom in the room is meant as something that would only be used in an online option class where you had people physically in the room and people at a distance. And it's just a sort of an enhanced live participation mechanism for online option classes. So thank you guys for listening to all this. I'm more than happy to talk to any of you about it at any time. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Great, thanks so much.
Thanks, you guys, for sitting in.
Oh yeah, thank you guys. Ciao.
So look at the other people watching other than the ones that are on the video, right? The students.
I was watching, but I didn't have my camera on, so you couldn't
Yeah,
see me.
if you don't put your camera on, you won't show up on the screen at all, which is kind of nice.
Does the instructor know how many people are logged in?
Yes, you could know how many people are logged in, and it supports up to 50 people without needing to get the webinar license, just using the regular web conferencing license. Yeah, a good question I have, which I don't have the answer to, is what is our maximum simultaneous live streams in a single class that we expect?